The Menendez killers could be out on the streets before summer. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more right here on today's Charlie Crimebuster. It is what some people are calling the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. Charlie Crimebuster, CharlieCrimebuster.com, and PeacemakerNetwork.com are copyrights owned by Charlie Crimebuster. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Charlie Crimebuster here, saying thank you for being aboard the old Charlie Crime train today. We're talking about the Menendez Brothers, and there is new information released just this week. We're going to get you updated. We like to keep our people that follow Charlie Crimebuster right on the cutting edge of crime information. So thank you again for being on board. Let me get some housekeeping out of the way quickly, and then we'll get right to the heart of the matter. First of all, we would invite you to check out other podcasts. We have them all listed on charliecrimebuster.com. And there's several podcasts about this very subject that we're covering today. Hey, we'll get you updated on that in just a moment. But let me invite you to go again to charliecrimebuster.com, find all those good episodes there for you to what James Buckland calls a kind of a podcast binge on all of those. There are about 200 of them there. And we'd like to also say to you who would like to support the program, well, go to peacemakernetwork.com. They are our sponsors. And by you helping them, well, they help us. So we would encourage you to go to peacemakernetwork.com. You read all about those brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. Yes, we're talking about the military, the brave men and women of the military. We're also talking about law enforcement and those first responders who are always there right when you need them. peacemakernetwork.com. Hey, we'd also like to invite you to join us on our YouTube program. On YouTube, we discuss the podcast that we previously dropped. James Buckland and I take some time to talk about these issues that we share with you on the podcast. I think you'll like that. Just go to YouTube and tag it Charlie Crimebuster, and you can find all you need to find out right there. All right, so let's get right to the heart of the matter, as you say. The Menendez brothers, well, they may be resentenced. Now, this decision could lead to their freedom, and that raises some fears, right? Putting cold-blooded killers right back on the streets. And that case, well, it sparked a debate, with one district attorney arguing for leniency, while another insists on full confession before any adjustments are made, or if those adjustments should be made at all. Well, the outcome of this legal battle, it does remain uncertain. But my friend, mark it down. The implications, well, they're profound for both justice and public safety. But first, breaking news on this subject. The Menendez Brothers' resentencing hearing, which was set to take place next week, well, it's been delayed, folks. Yep, it's been delayed. The hearing on L.A. County District Attorney Nathan Hotchman's motion to withdraw the resentencing motion by the previous DA, you remember him, well, it was initially scheduled for March the 20th, but now it is set for April the 11th. This is all according to ABC News. Now, hold on. In addition to all this, there is also a request to the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, to grant clemency to them. So I guess what I'm trying to say, folks, there are a whole lot of moving parts in this situation. And we're going to guide you through those parts on the Charlie Crime Train today. But first, if you've not really been up to date, we'll get you up to date. But before we get into the killings, let's just take a quick look at Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Hey, now picture this. You're the guardian of 4 teenagers. you get that dreaded call in the middle of the night. That call that your 4 teenagers have been nabbed by the police. So you're requested to come to the police department to pick them up. You and a friend drive down to pick them up. While you're leaving, you stop off at a business lot late at night to talk about the arrest. But while you're there, other cops come upon the parked vehicle. Now get this, a parked vehicle in a business lot late at night with 4 individuals in it. I've been out there on those late nights patrolling the streets, and when I see something suspicious, I have to check it out. That's what I'm being paid to do, to protect and serve. So naturally curious about what these 4 individuals are up to that are parked in this vehicle in a business that has been closed and it is late at night. Well, of course, they do the next thing that police officers do. They run the plate to check it out. And they find out that the vehicle that the Guardian used to pick up the kids, well, it was stolen. Yep, stolen. So when the police approached, they took off. Stopped at a nearby park and ride lot. Got out and hid, but not for long. The popo napped him up. So now, the 2 adults in the stolen car and the 4 teens are hauled once again back down to the police station. Ah, man. So these idiots who were bold enough to go pick up their kids from the police for joyriding, they went to pick them up in a stolen car themselves. They are indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crooks of the Week. I tell you, crazy just keeps happening with those crazy crooks, doesn't it? So back to our focus. August 1989. Jose Menendez. He was an executive at the RCA Records in Los Angeles. Jose and his wife Kitty were shot and killed in their Beverly Hills mansion. Now, you recall that in the last podcast that we did on this, we talked about those brothers that now we know have been convicted of that murder. And while they were looking at other situations as to what happened to the parents, the police were, they also kept their eyes on those brothers all the time. And they noticed that the brothers went a little wild with their spending. Actually went a lot wild with their spending the money that the parents had left them. And on top of that, one of them even confessed to a psychologist, and that psychologist in turn told his girlfriend who he was in an affair with. And you know, those never really turn out right and good for anybody, right? Yep. She blabbed as well, and pretty soon it got to the police. And so there was an arrest. In March 1999, Lyle, he's arrested. And then the 18-year-old Eric, well, he turns himself in a few days later. Now, these guys are accused of first-degree murder. But one thing you should know, it was not really easy to put these guys away. In fact, it took all the way to 1993 to get this trial going. They were killed, the parents, in 1989. The trial starts in 1993. Each of them had a separate jury. The prosecutors, they would argue that they killed their parents for financial gain. Remember, they spent all that money. Now, the brothers' attorneys, they do not dispute that the brothers killed their parents. But they did argue that they acted out of self-defense after years of emotional and sexual abuse by their father. In January of 1994, both juries are deadlocked. Both trials, both juries are deadlocked. So you think, well, case is over. But no, charges are refiled. These cases were not dismissed with prejudice. In other words, you could refile charges. In October of 1995, well, the brothers' retrial begins, but this time it's with a single jury. Both of them are tried at the same time with a single jury. And a whole lot of that defense evidence about those alleged sexual abuse that they said that occurred, well, that is excluded. A lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it is excluded during the second trial. And this time, in March of 1996, the jurors convict both brothers of first-degree murder. And they are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So it's still not over. In February 1998, California Appeals Court, they appealed it to the California Appeal Court. Well, guess what? Didn't work for them. The California Appeal Court, it upheld their conviction. Then in May of 1998, well, the California Supreme Court agrees with the appeals court decision. So they're trying to get this turned over. But then there is another attempt to try to get this turned over, these charges. They file what is known as habeas corpus petition. Now, the habeas corpus petition, that is actually a Latin phrase, as a lot of legality stuff is, and it means the words, you should have the body. Now, for those not familiar with the actual legal term, sometimes they think it means the body of the victim, or the victims in this case, but that's not actually what it means. It means the body of the person who's been convicted. In other words, you should have the body. Well, it's an equitable remedy by which a report can be made to the court that alleges the unlawful detention or imprisonment of an individual. And then the habeas part of it, the habeas corpus, well, that requests that body should be brought before the judge. The person, in other words, that was convicted, meaning that the court orders the individual custodian, which is usually a prison official, to bring the prisoner to court, to present the body of the prisoner to the court. And then the court determines whether their detention is lawful. So in October of 1998, the brothers file habeas corpus petitions with the California Supreme Court. Denied the very next year. Then in August 1999, they file a habeas corpus petition to the federal district court, which again are denied in 2003. And then in 2005, the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court Appeals denies again that appeal. So they've appealed and appealed and appealed, and they have been denied and denied and denied and denied, and so it's all quiet. Now, 18 years goes past before the next significant court interaction takes place. In the meantime, you might be asking yourself, what is happening with these guys? Well, here's a quick look at what happened in that approximately 18 years. Well, of course, this has drawn attention from other inmates. Anytime you have a high-profile person in prison, you have inmates who take notice. And in 2005, Eric, he told people, well, I've gotten into fights, many fights, but I never fight first. You have to learn to be smart. There is a state of fear that exists as background noise. You always have to be aware of who's around you. You have to continually hone in on what he called your survival instincts. Well, that said, as far as we can find out, Lyle and Eric have not been regular troublemakers behind bars. In fact, they said that during their incarceration, this is a report, Eric Menendez has occurred only 2 serious rules violations. Joseph incurred no rules violation. And because of their good behavior and their efforts, well, they are now able to have jobs and classes. Eric and Lyle now live in a non-designated programming facility. This is known as Echo Yard. And Echo Yard, well, it offers inmates a lot more freedom and opportunities for educational programming. You see, Echo Yard prisoners, they take yoga and they have art classes and they study different academic subjects and join groups to address issues like anger management, alcoholism. And even though Echo Yard is less restrictive, well, yeah, of course, according to other people, it's still part of a prison. They have to stand for formal accounts. Lyle and Eric, they live in different dorm rooms with other inmates, and they have to get locked in overnight beginning at 9 p.m. In fact, somebody said, well, that's pretty good because they never really got that at home, so there is some discipline in their life. Eric, according to reports, well, he spends some time painting in prison. And Eric and Lyle, well, they came up with a plan to paint a mural on the walls surrounding Echo Yard. Lyle also served as an inmate government for 15 years. In other words, he worked on prison reform and interests also that Eric shares. Now, they've both offered support and guidance to other people who have had, quote, unquote, childhood sexual abuse. So you see where I'm going at here. You see the defense of these guys are trying to say these guys are being rehabilitated. You know, they're coming along. They've done good, and so they deserve a break. But a lot more other things are happening behind bars that you may not realize. And you get the idea that, well, prison for them isn't as bad as prison is for other people. You see, they are in Group A prisoners, and they have the most privileges, and they can receive visits and make calls within the correction system. You see, now, for a lot of people who are incarcerated, for them to make calls is very expensive. It costs money, and people have to put up that money for them to make those calls. But wait a minute, this is California. And in January of 2023, telephone calls, well, it's free for inmates and their families. You see, also, the state of California provide tablets now, and from August of 2021, they provide tablets for prisoners. So prisoners now have tablets. And the tablets now, they do not permit access to social media or internet browsers, but they can read magazines, keep up with the news. They also can stay in touch with approved contacts through these tablets. So now they have email and free calls, and they also get a limited amount of video calls. They get a limited amount from calls and text messages, and of course they have the option to pay for more. And guess what else? Prison, well, it doesn't stop Lyle and Eric from finding love, because both of them have been married. Tammy was married to Eric. She watched his first trial, wrote to him. They met in prison in 1997, got married at Folsom in 1999. Tammy even wrote a book about their relationship entitled, They Said We'd Never Make It, My Life with Eric Menendez. And Lyle, he married a lady by the name of Rebecca Sneed there in maximum security. That, by the way, was his second, did you hear me? His second prison wedding. First was a marriage to former model Anna Erickson. That ended in divorce. And by the way, California prisons, they do permit inmates to have those visits, conjugal visits, which are officially known as quote-unquote family visits. Now, prisoners serving life sentences without parole were not eligible for these visits again until the law changed in dear old California in 2016. And now they have family visits, conjugal visits, for prisoners who even committed a violent offense against a family member. Now, I would say, though, and I need to mention this, that because it was such a violent offense, they became ineligible for those family visits. Now, maybe you now realize why sometimes I use the word glamour slammer for some prison time that some people do. So I guess I'm trying to say to you folks, if you're going to commit a crime and do the time, then maybe you ought to do it in California, because it appears that it's a little easier to do that time in California. So these guys, well, while prison is prison, and we don't wish it upon anyone, we also don't wish that people be blown away by shotguns, right? But as it was, now they want even more freedom. So in May 2023, Now the attorneys are coming again, and now they're asking for the court to reconsider the conviction and sentence now in light of new evidence. You have to have new evidence to get this thing reconsidered. So this new evidence comes from a former member of a boy band who said that he was raped by Jose Menendez, that's the boy's father. He says, this member of the boy band, that he was raped by Jose Menendez when he was 14 years of age. They also submit a letter that Eric wrote to his cousin about his father's abuse before the killings. So what they are simply saying is that there was sexual abuse toward these young men. Now, while that has come to light in these two situations, it has not been proven. And the new DA now in California says he doesn't believe that it happened. He doesn't believe that there's evidence that that happened. And beyond that, he's saying that they are not showing any remorse, have never showed remorse for slaughtering their parents on that night. So here is the request. Then there's a lot more emphasis placed on this. In September 2024, just a few months ago, Netflix released the crime drama Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story. It was 9 episodes. It was all about the killings. In October the 4th, right after that, the known district attorney there, he said that they were reviewing the new evidence in the case. And October the 16th of 2024, well, a whole bunch of the family members of the Menendez brothers, they hold a news conference and they plead for their release from prison. These are relatives, even of the parents who were killed. The relatives are saying that the jurors who sentenced them with life without parole, well, they were a part of society that was not ready to hear that boys could be raped, that boys could be sexually abused. And so in October 24th, in 2024, the prosecutors then say they will petition the court to re-sentence the brothers. And that, my friend, could lead to their release. So in October, the prosecutor there in California petitions the court to re-sentence the brothers. Now, there's a new prosecutor since then. And that new prosecutor, he says, hey, I'm going to look at the evidence. I'm going to look at what takes place. And the new prosecutor, Nathan Holman, he was sworn into office on December the 3rd, 2024. And when he was looking at it, first of all, he put it off because of January the 17th, there were those fires, remember, in L.A. region. And he pushed that resentencing hearing back then. And then in February, just last month, Holman says his office will now oppose a new trial for the Menendez brothers. He says that he doubts the evidence of the sexual abuse, including the letter that Eric wrote to his cousin. And he said that wasn't really pertinent to the case. So here we have a new DA now, and he's opposing this new trial. But wait a minute, something else is involved in all of these things. I told you a lot of moving parts. Back a couple months ago, November the 18th, well, now we hear from California Governor Gavin Newsom. He said, because you see, they had also gone to him requested that he get involved and grant them a pardon or some clemency in the case. Well, Gavin Newsom says he would not decide on granting the brothers clemency until after the newly elected district had a chance to review the case. Well, now the district attorney has had opportunity to review it, and he has said that he's going to oppose it. Now, during all of this, it did get before a county superior judge in Los Angeles in November. He said he needed more time to make the decision, and he pushed it back to January instead of December, as was originally planned. And so now we know that it's been pushed back not once, but now it's pushed back twice. And we do know also that there's actually even a parole hearing that has been set up in the idea that if they're resentenced, and when they're resentenced, if they do not get life without the possibility of parole, then they can go before the parole board, and the parole board could then grant parole if they needed to. You see, right now they can't pronounce parole because there is still upon the brothers the sentence of imprisonment for life without parole. So it boils down to this. There is going to be a hearing. Now we know that the first prosecutor, he wasn't going to deny that hearing. He wasn't going to fight that hearing. He was going to give them an opportunity to look at it. But now we know that the new prosecutor now has said, Hochman has said, he has said that he's going to oppose it. And then he's going to let the judge decide what the judge decides. The judge could decide to grant resentencing. The judge could decide not to grant resentencing. So it's really going to be up to the judge. So there is a hearing coming. It has been postponed now. Before, when we last reported on this, we knew that the DA there in California was arguing for resentencing, was arguing for an ease upon the sentence. Now we know that the DA that now has been voted, who's tougher on crime, and boy, they need to be tougher on crime in California, says he's going to oppose it. But what about you? What do you think? Do you think these guys deserve an opportunity at freedom? These guys who walked in there and blew their parents away with shotguns to the place that you couldn't even hardly recognize who they were? Do you think these guys deserve freedom? And don't tell me that they've been suffering while they've been away. Of course, anybody that's been placed in prison, there is some suffering. You are locked up away from society, away from the freedoms that you and I enjoy every day. But these guys are in a situation that's not as bad as it is for other people. And think with me about another thing. These guys are going to get an opportunity for it. You know why? Because there is money behind it. Yes, there's money behind it. Think about many people in prison right now who did not do as terribly violent deeds as these guys did. They did not do the kind of violence that these guys brought to their parents, and yet they do not have opportunity. You know why? Because they do not have the money to buy the attorneys to continue and continue and continue to fight for their freedom. You know, my friend, justice, sometimes, unfortunately, it is the color of green, isn't it? Sometimes people with money can get things that people who do not have money cannot get. Is that fair? No. Things are not always fair, as you and I know. But what do you think? You think these guys deserve another chance? And do you think the judge will give another chance? Love to hear from you. Reach out to us with a shout out. You can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster at gmail.com. Charlie Crimebuster at gmail.com. Until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert, my friend, because the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.